play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. It is Tuesday, March 26th. Michigan and Michigan State are both going to the Sweet 16. Otis just came in the room to say hello. And we're back with a very special edition of the pod. Dylan is a trooper, and despite being sick as all hell, is going to grind this thing through and then get on a plane and fly to California.
Yeah, apologies for the delay, everyone. It would have been even worse if you had to listen to me yesterday, so we'll just stick it out and get after the pod today.
There you go, man. I can confirm yesterday he was dying when we parted ways at the airport in, where were we? What city was that? Des Moines?
Detroit
Airport, yeah. He kind of looked like someone walking off to his death. So he's going to California. I am getting on a plane tomorrow to Washington, D.C. To go with the Spartans in the East Regional. So the pod will be bi-coastal this week when we check back maybe on I'm not sure how we'll do this with them playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but surely we will record from afar at some point, right, Dylan?
We'll make it happen. The pod has done a really good job of staying in sync, and we're going off track here.
That's right.
Same location all the way, and now it's just coast to coast.
But maybe dovetail back in Minneapolis a week from.
Oh boy!
Oh, what do you think about that?
It feels like it might just happen.
I'm putting it at a 20% chance. What about you?
33.
Woo! That's pretty impressive. I mean, that's pretty good because Michigan has to get through Gonzaga. Michigan State would have to get through Duke. 33 seems. I don't know if that would be the number in Vegas. I'll put it that way. I think
it would not be. It just feels like it's inevitable at this point.
This is true. Okay, so before we dive into previewing Michigan State, LSU, and Michigan, blanking. Texas Tech. Thank you. Sorry, it's been a hell of a march. Before we get into that, just a reminder that if you enjoy this podcast and if you want to support what we do, this is a free podcast without advertisement. If you want to support what we do, though, subscribe to UM Hoops and follow Dylan's awesome work over there, and subscribe to The Athletic and check out my work there. So that's our short plea. And then tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your friends about our respective sites. Leave a review on iTunes for the pod. And let's get into it, big man. We're going to start with your game in case you die mid-pod or have to go to the bathroom or something. Michigan, Texas Tech. Am I right in saying that the Michigan-Florida game was an odd kind of mini preview?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a very good defense. I don't know that they really play the same kind of defense.
Right.
And I think Texas Tech is just a lot better team.
Yep.
If you look at any of the computers, like Bart Torvik's site has Texas Tech as the best team in the country since February 1st. And they've just been playing really well. Obviously, they lost early in the Big 12 game, but they won their last, I think it was like 8 regular season Big 12 games. And they cruised through the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament against a Buffalo team that a lot of people thought might put up a fight and really didn't.
Yeah. We talked about back when the bracket came out that the Texas Tech kind of jumped off the bracket to me when I was looking at Michigan's draw. Really tough game. I just wonder how much they like their strengths eliminate each other, and kind of they are oddly. Who had that one chart with the offense defense metric?
I think Jordan Sperber tweeted that out too, and with the scatter plot, right?
Yeah. And they're basically overlaid.
Yeah, and what's funny about it though is that they play very differently than each other, right? Like they're the two best defense in the country, but what Texas Tech tries to do is very different than what Michigan tries to do, right? Like Michigan's kind of keep it packed in, run people off the 3-point line.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily try to get out and force turnovers, whereas Texas Tech will pressure the ball quite a bit, and their main concept is to deny the middle. So they'll ice every ball screen, which means every ball screen they'll try to force to the baseline. They'll give up baseline penetration, but then they just kind of swarm you after you get to the baseline, and they have a couple shot blockers inside who are just pretty incredible in defending the rim. So they're a rare team that's able to defend the hell out of the rim, block shots, but also force turnovers.
And in terms of forcing things, I thought Florida did a decent job of keeping Xavier Simpson from going right. But I was reading up on the Hoop Vision preview of Texas Tech, and one of the things that jumped out to me there was, few teams in the country do as well forcing the ball a certain direction as Texas Tech. And as we know, as Michigan fans know, you gotta force Simpson to his left. You can't let him go right. And, in terms of the one-on-one matchup that he will face in this game, I'm not going to pretend to know enough about Texas Tech to know how that's going to go. But if the whole defense is based on putting the ball in one direction, right, that has to be a focal point right there.
Yeah, so Matt Mooney is their starting point guard, and he is a grad transfer from South Dakota. And he is one of the best. I guess the only two guys in the Big Ten with a higher steal rate than him are the two guys at Penn State, Jamari Wheeler and Josh Reeves. So he's really good pressuring the ball. We don't really see a lot of teams in the Big Ten that still ice ball screens like religiously as Texas Tech does. And I guess what icing means is, again, you're forcing the ball to reject this. You're forcing the ball handler to reject the screen and go toward the baseline where the big man waits. The best counter for that from Michigan's point of view is to pick and pop. And Texas Tech will do some late switching in those kind of situations to defend against the pick and pop. But that's for sure, I think, an area that Michigan will probably look for in order to exploit. And John Teskey's pick and pop has kind of been all or nothing, right?
Yes. And Texas Tech will also show zone, right?
Yep, they'll randomly go zone. Sometimes they'll put in a little full court press, and you don't really see that usually with a team that is just like, you don't usually see switching defenses from the best defense in the country, right? Like, you don't see Michigan switching defenses, and they will just throw it in there and just as a change of pace, kind of like we saw against Florida.
And then offensively, I guess Michigan fans can just think back to Bob Knight, right? It's basically Bob Knight motion offense. Chris Beard worked under him at Texas Tech, and that's kind of what they do. They're what are the efficiency numbers looking like offensively? Not great.
35th nationally,
and Michigan is in the 20s or 20th, 18 somewhere in there. The last time
something like that.
Yeah,
and basically it comes down to they'll run some of that motion stuff, but then Jarrett Culver just has to make a play, and he's a 6'6" wing. Top 10 pick projected in the draft. He is, I think he leads them in points, rebounds, and assists. So he basically does everything for them, and he's pretty damn good. But that's a 1-for-1 matchup with Charles Matthews that'll be quite something to watch.
One of the things interesting, looking at the Hoop Vision preview, they do the pre-tourney efficiency comparisons. And when you look at the way their numbers match up, right? So elite defense and kind of, I guess, middling, for lack of a better term, offense. The only comparisons that actually get past the Sweet 16 were 2009 Connecticut, which went to the Final Four, 2008 Memphis, which went to the the Final Four. Oh, sorry, 2009 Connecticut went to the Elite Eight. 2008 Memphis went to the Final Four, and 2003 Kansas Final Four team. Nothing recently, but I don't know. Take from that what you will. But
so these are Texas Tech comparisons?
Yes. I actually thought it would be higher. I thought there'd be more teams that matched up with them that would have made it to the Elite Eight or Final Four or beyond.
It's kind of jarring to watch their offense because it feels sort of like old-fashioned. Like you don't see a lot
it's Bob Knight's
of offenses that really play like this, right? So, what did you say?
You said it's an old school offense. Well, yeah, Bob. There doesn't get much more old school than Bob Knight.
But it's just you just don't see it, right? It's so it will certainly take an adjustment. It's also a lot of actions and sets and stuff that I think Michigan will be able to pretty well prepare to know what's coming, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't think there's any like crazy concepts that are going to catch Michigan's defense off guard in this game.
Does it really boil down to can Michigan score on Texas Tech or can Texas Tech score on Michigan? Is that at the end of the day what this will come down to?
I think the answer is probably that neither team can score as efficiently as they would want to,
sure,
but one team will score just enough, right? Like it's going to be one of those games. I mean, I think that the way Texas Tech plays defensively will be a struggle for Michigan's offense to adjust to. At the same time, I don't see anything on Texas Tech that can really break down what Michigan wants to do on defense, and then it just comes down to really execution.
Yeah, so Texas Tech, they put up 78 on Buffalo. They've scored in the 80s through league play, right? Like, do they have a slightly more dynamic offense, or is it just a product of playing in the Big 12?
The adjusted efficiency numbers would tell you it's a product of playing in the Big 12. So, yes, they scored. What did Michigan score in the league? So they scored a couple extra points per 100 possessions in Big 12 play, but the Big 10 is just such a better defensive league that doesn't really tell you that much, right? There's not as many great defenses in the Big 12.
Because they didn't play dramatically different paces. Texas Tech in league play averaged only a 1.5 possessions more than Michigan did in Big 10 play. So it's not like, it's not a run and gun Big 12 team versus, this ain't the Oklahoma State game from a couple years ago, certainly.
Yeah, the problem, no, it will definitely not be that Oklahoma State game. Oof. Far from that. It might have half as many points as that game had. There's just no, other than Kansas State and Texas Tech, there's just no other teams in the Big 12 that really play great defense. Whereas in the Big 10, there's Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin, right? Like there's a lot of good defensive teams. It's just an overall lower scoring league.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this game, and I go way back and forth on it because I've thought from the beginning that Texas Tech would be the team that knocked Michigan out, but then I'm also thinking more and more like, well, there's also the product of familiarity when it comes to kind of seeing a team's weak points, right? And I watched every Michigan game this year. You've watched every Michigan game this year, and I come back to that. Man, those offensive spans that I just, when just nothing goes in, and they had a couple against Florida. And I just imagine, that combination versus a defense like this, is there, what's the survival rate in a scenario like that? And I like if there was any dramatic difference in the numbers, it'd be easy to like kind of pinpoint something. But when you've broken stuff down, like the first thing I looked at was 3-point percentage, and they're within like a percentage of each other in league play. Like just something that's going to send this game in one way or another. Do you have anything that's jumped out to you?
Well, the one interesting difference in the two defenses is that Texas Tech actually allows a lot of 3-point attempts. 40% of the shots that people take against them are threes, which is pretty high for a great defense. They also only allow teams to shoot 30%. And there's various opinions on what that means, and if that's a bit of variance, if it's luck. But Chris Beard's teams have always done a really good job of keeping that 3-point accuracy number down, which makes me think they're doing something right. Mm-hmm. But I think Michigan was going to have to make some threes over this defense if they want to win on Thursday.
Right. And my other question would be, Texas Tech has had some turnover issues, at least a little more, certainly more so than Michigan. But I wonder if that's just the league that they play, because like Michigan is not going out and creating turnovers. If that's just kind of the style of play from the league, that you're almost just, because of some of the teams you're going to run into, you're just going to have a couple extra turnovers a game.
Yeah, I don't see their turnover issues as something where Michigan goes and turns them over on a quarter of their possessions and flips the game.
Right.
I think the bigger issue is, or the bigger turnover issue for either team is that if Michigan can handle their pressure, like Michigan's the best team in the country or up there and not turning it over. Texas Tech's 10th in turning teams over. That's a big swing stat where if Michigan can control that part of the game, then they can really take away an element of Texas Tech's defense that makes it great.
And it'll be interesting. The coaching matchup is certainly a pretty interesting look here. You have old wise John Beilein versus Chris Beard, who's in his fourth year as a head coach but is in his third NCAA tournament. The job this guy has done at Texas Tech is pretty unreal. He went 6-12 in his first year in the league, 11-7 in his second year, 14-4 this year.
This year's crazy because they lost 3 starters,
right? And
they brought in a couple grad transfers and basically picked up where they left off, which is pretty impressive to do. Their starting center is a grad transfer from St. John's, and then their starting point guard is a grad transfer from South Dakota. And they weren't really picked to do much, and instead Jarrett Culver turned into a lottery pick, and these grad transfers have been fantastic. So it's quite a coaching job, I would say. Yeah,
and it's an interesting situation. I think we were having this conversation last week of how many times have you seen these grad transfers or up transfers or whatever like really, really pay major dividends for teams that go deep in the tournament, and there isn't a huge number of examples for it, and lo and behold, these guys have 2 of them on the same roster.
Yeah, and this one other, I guess, swing matchup to take a look at will be at the shooting guard. The Jordan Poole against the Moretti kid he's Italian. He is basically the best shooter in the country, shooting 45% from 3, 56% on 2s, and 92% at the line. He is really good at drawing fouls when he shoots the ball. He is one of the best pure shooters in the country, and Jordan Poole has had some up and down games in terms of keeping track of those kind of players, right? You're going to see him running off flare screens, all these different things. Really key for Poole to stay locked in on that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, what did you kind of think of just the product that you saw against Florida? I mean, is that a team you're buying stock in for, I guess, again, lack of a better term?
I mean, Michigan's looked really good for the last month when it's not playing against Michigan State. And I don't know that Texas Tech has the offensive firepower to really beat Michigan. I mean, it might win the game, but it's not going to pull away because they just can't score against this Michigan defense. That's where I thought Michigan played great in Des Moines. You disagree?
No. That I thought they certainly didn't, slog through it. They took care of business in the first game, and then the second game, I thought it was a potential danger spot, and they handled Florida. It's not easy to win a second round Big Ten tournament game or a second round NCAA tournament game by 15 points, and they knocked them out, held them under 50 points, and I like what I saw from Charles Matthews. I like what I saw from Xavier Simpson. John Teskey hit a couple shots, and I think the big question for me in terms of does this team advance one more game, and then a game after that, and then beyond that, is consistency in production from Iggy Brazdeikis and Jordan Poole. I think that's the biggest question.
Where are you falling with, can you hear me? Am I muted?
No, I hear you.
All right. What did you take from Iggy this week? He kind of struggled against Florida. Is it just a wild card what you're going to get from him at this point? Is there a better way for him to get involved? Where do you kind of fall on that?
Yeah, I think he just he's a freshman and he doesn't seem to have an equilibrium to his game. It seems like sometimes he gets the ball and wants to do everything at once. He wants to make up for every possession that he hasn't touched it or anything like that, all in one, or shot it, I should say, not touched it, because everyone touches the ball for the most part. But he had that opening dunk in the Florida game, and it looked like, okay, this guy's going to go ripping and tearing for 22 tonight or something like that, and then he just got.
And he had the opening three in the second half. He scored the first play of both halves and didn't score again. And
I think he immediately gets ahead of his skis when that happens, and he kind of gets a little bit outside of himself and doesn't let the game come to him. And that's just something that hasn't really transpired, I think, this year. And you've seen it when he can be dominant in the Maryland game, when he was just a dominant force, and that's what he wants to be every time. But if those looks aren't there or those shots aren't falling, then he can miss a lot of bad shots rather quickly, right?
Yeah, he's struggling to get to the basket and finish, and that's kind of been a trend over the last couple months and really into Big Ten play. But it's an area he was really good at in November and December and has kind of fallen off. I guess the good news for Michigan is that Isaiah Livers looks really comfortable and is kind of finally found a role off the bench, and I think he's comfortable at multiple spots. He is not necessarily – he didn't shoot the three that well last week, but if he starts making those threes, that could be a game changer, I would say, for Michigan in the regional.
Yeah. Sorry, just got distracted here. So, prediction time?
Prediction time? Anything else that we want to throw in on Texas Tech here? I will go. Are we just making predictions? You want to throw anything in? You don't seem you've been all in DC mode. I can tell you're not even looking into Texas Tech.
Yeah, you're the one who writes you got the graphs and the charts and the pie charts. I don't know. What, you got anything else you want to share?
I do not.
Don't give out too much. People got to subscribe and make sure they get that sweet Hoops content.
Exactly. I would go with. I think this is a one-possession game, down to the last minute, and I'll probably take Michigan just because I trust Beeline to get more out of his offense than Beard to get more out of his offense.
Fair. That's fair. On my original bracket, I had Texas Tech, so I think it'd be chicken shit to now flip it. So I agree with you. It's going to be very tight. Decided it in the last 90 seconds. I'll take Texas Tech on a fluky play, and hearts are broken. So
cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded. All right, let's flip it to the other side of the country. Going East Coast, more my style. Michigan State versus LSU. And I have a feeling, man. It's going to be a weird and wild week in DC. You got Duke in the house, so there's going to be God knows how much national media. Zion in the building. We got Michael Abiani having a press conference today about Nike. Who knows what's going to come out of that?
I thought he's getting arrested.
Yeah, they're still gonna release all kinds of stuff.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. So you got that. Michigan State's always a story.
LSU doesn't have a
coach. The NCAA should just have some plainclothes officers probably in the building for this event. But the game itself, looking at LSU, the number one thing that kind of jumps out to me is what they do particularly well is something that you can get, or the two things they do particularly well are two things that you can get Michigan State in trouble with, and that's offensive rebounding and that's creating turnovers. And I think Michigan State, spoiler, I think Michigan State wins this game. I'll take Tom Izzo and Cassius Winston and the way that this team plays as a real team over kind of a mad scrambling LSU squad with an interim head coach. I'll take that 99 out of 100 times. But for an upset to occur, I think is probably the bigger conversation here. I would say if it's, if LSU is able to create 15 extra possessions off of turnovers and offensive rebounds and get shots, and then Tremont Waters pull some stuff out of his ass and they topple them.
So the way I would put this game is, if you flip the coaches, I would take LSU by 15.
Okay.
So they have a better, if you let Tom Izzo coach this team all year,
right,
they would be pretty damn good. And they have all this talent. And if you watch 5 minutes of an LSU game, you'll see it. Right. If you watch 40 minutes, you'll be like, what the hell is going on here? And so that's what it comes down to for me. But in one game, anything can really happen.
Yes, exactly. If LSU can get Michigan State on its heels a little bit, I don't know if Cassius Winston basically just going on that run and single-handedly knocking out Minnesota. I don't know if you can do that right against LSU.
Point guard matchup, high level.
High
two
level.
Of the best ball screen guards in the country. Waters is a really, really good defender. He's ranked 4th nationally in steal rate. He's handsy. He'll just steal the ball. He hasn't shot the ball that well from 3, 32%. But in terms of making reads in the ball screen game, highlight passes, the works, he's got it. And he is really fun to watch. I've loved his games since we saw him in Maui last year. Mm-hmm. And that's really the matchup I think you have to start with. Whereas I think I had the stats pulled up here, but best pick and roll guards in the country in terms of points created. Cassius Winston is at 6th. Waters is 13th. Xavier Simpson 5th. So these are basically some of the top ball screen guards you'll see. I wonder how Michigan State ends up guarding ball screens in this game. Because Naz Reid can pick and pop, and they have a lot of weapons around him. From what I've seen, Michigan State has mostly only switched ball screens against Michigan. Right. I wonder if there's a point that they think about doing that against LSU.
Right, and it's a major advantage to have done it and done it well, just to kind of know that that's in the pocket. And at the end of the day, LSU is a 32% three-point shooting team on the year and under 32% three-point shooting in conference play. Michigan State's a better shooting team, much more. Well, not much more, actually. LSU's offense was pretty efficient. Its defensive efficiency is certainly better. But, Michigan State's the better shooting team, right? LSU's going to want to do as much as it can at the rim, go up and over what is a good Michigan State front line, but it's not long, right? No one would call Michigan State's front line long. It's Xavier Tillman and Nick Ward are more kind of rumbling, tumbling type guys, but they can be out-athleted in this game.
And LSU has some dudes who are just going to crash the glass over and over and over again.
The definition of dudes.
They're Naz Reid is 250, Cavell Bigby Williams 250, 6'11". Emmett Williams is a 6'6" wing who just crashes the glass. I mean, that's basically their offense.
Yep.
And we've seen Michigan State struggle on the glass. I know their season numbers are pretty good, but in the Big Ten, they had issues from time to time on the defensive glass.
Yeah, and what was interesting, so Tom Izzo had a press conference yesterday, and I asked him, obviously, Michigan State hasn't been running quite as much as it did when it was 10 deep or whatever. they've kind of gradually turned into more of a half-court team, but it's still Michigan State, and they do want to get out and run and steal buckets and score sometimes on 3 passes or in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. And I asked Tom, how much does a team that uses the offensive glass kind of as a vehicle for production, how does that then limit your transition? Because in theory, you would think, okay, if they're sending everyone, then you got to send everyone. That in turn would slow your transition. And he came back at it as Michigan State wants to utilize it. They see that as a opportunity to attack more. And because if everyone's coming back, and if you can get that rebound and you're going full speed down the floor, you can get things are even more open for your transition. Now, that's a bold play.
No, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay.
When you see a team that crashes the glass, you have opportunities in transition.
You better get your rebound, though, if you got guys leaking.
Well, yeah, but I think that is a risk, sure, but I think this game jump-starting MSU's transition offense could really be a thing. LSU plays 59th in the country in tempo. They run. I don't know that you want to get into a track meet with MSU because a lot of teams run and kind of freestyle. Mm-hmm. If you get in a fast-paced game with MSU, they're going to score buckets because they know how to run efficiently.
And they should be fresh, right? They played on Saturday, and it's a Friday game. He gave the team off on Sunday. So they should have relatively fresh legs. And, if this game turns into Cassius Winston and Tremont Waters going up and down, I'm here for it. I'm down. That'd be awesome. Especially as the undercard before Duke comes out and takes the floor and you see the preview of what's coming in the Elite Eight.
So I have a stat here. LSU, 17.4% of their defensive possessions in transition.
Do you have two screens in front of you?
Yeah.
Dude. It looks like on my end of the screen, you just keep looking to your left, and it looks like you're keep looking out the window or something. That I'm like, how long has that mailman been out
monitor.
There? Of course you have a second monitor, nerd. But okay, go ahead.
So that's 264th in terms of percentage of possessions in transition.
Okay.
Compare that, Michigan is first in the country at 10%. So that's a pretty big gap in terms of preventing actual opportunities in transition. So that is definitely an opportunity for Michigan State to run. We'll just have to see, I guess, if they can do that wall holding up on the defensive glass.
Yeah, I'm in terms of the glass and even just interior scoring, whatever. I'm just really curious to see Michigan State go up against. I'm trying to think of anything that they've kind of seen that's similar to LSU in terms of 6'10", 6'11" athletes that they've gone against. Naz Reid is 6'10", 250, above the rim. They just got. They had all the length in the world. Can you think of any? I'm not coming up with anything off the top of my head. Maybe Maryland. But
yeah, Maryland's probably the closest comparison in terms of they should be like that. But LSU just really,
it's different.
It's different. They're impressed. They really impose their physicality on the game, I would say. When you watch them play, it's quite obvious.
And you look at their schedule. They've only lost 3 games since December 12th. No, that's not right. Yes, it is. Jesus. Those losses were at home to Arkansas, at home to Florida, and to Florida in... is that right? Damn.
They lost to Florida in the tournament.
Yeah.
But they also won, or they played, they're 5-1 in overtime games in the SEC. So they're definitely a bit lucky in that regard.
But it's an impressive schedule that beat Kentucky, beat Auburn, beat Tennessee, right? You can beat those 3 teams. You can beat Michigan State.
Yeah. So what I think back to is last year we saw Michigan play against Texas A&M, who was this big team loaded with pros from the SEC, supposed to dominate inside, and I think level of preparedness between Michigan and Texas A&M was staggering.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to run. They played a 70 possession game, and Michigan just blew them out of the water.
Right.
I could see something like that happening with Michigan State in this game.
That's an interesting comparison. I think this LSU team's definitely better than last year's Texas A&M team.
But we thought that Texas A&M team was good until they stepped on the floor. They had just beat UNC. Everyone, you know what I mean? Like, I just wonder about how prepared these two teams will be, and I just give a huge edge to Michigan State in that regard.
It's fair. I mean, now last year's Texas A&M team lost 13 games, but I see your point.
Fair, but similar style of team in terms of how they're built in a lot of ways, I would say.
Yeah. Per usual, now I'm looking at LSU more and more closely and wondering if fans might be looking ahead to Duke. This team better not be looking ahead to Duke.
If
that's for damn
LSU
sure.
plays its best game, it's certainly capable of winning. I would put the odds of LSU playing its best game at like 35%.
It's fair. What's the spread on this?
KenPom number is Michigan State by 7.
Right. And while we sit here, probably scaring the piss out of some Michigan State fans who are now thinking like, oh my God, is this game harder than I thought? We should remind everyone that a very mediocre Maryland team that we all watched a number of times this year nearly beat the same LSU team on a neutral court a week ago. It took basically Tremont Waters just getting the ball and just getting a bucket in the final seconds to win a game that at one point they had decent control over and almost tried to piss it away.
Yeah, I feel like every LSU game there's a 10-minute stretch where they look amazing and come out to a 10, 11-point lead, and then you turn the game on in the last 30 seconds, and it is a one-possession game just like by the law of how these games go, right? Like, they just do not play consistently for 40 minutes, and that's really what Michigan State has hung its hat on this year.
Okay. Do we have anything else in terms of breaking this one down?
I don't have anything crazy to add.
Well, we'll do the same on Michigan State that we did on Michigan. What did your takeaways from Des Moines? Is that what you saw there? Was that a team you're buying stock in?
I would say it doesn't really move the needle either way. The Bradley game was kind of a mess, but whatever. And then I've seen Michigan State beat Minnesota so many times that what am I going to take from that? So I would say it's about up to expectations. I don't know that they really, if they played a better team in the first round, maybe they challenged them more, but I don't know. I would say it did what you have to do, right? What are you going to say? Like, it's hard to take much from a win over Bradley in Minnesota. You agree?
Right. Oh, of course. There were some good things though. We had a conversation here a week ago where I was saying, I was throwing out some potential Kenny Goins theories that.
How'd that play out for you?
Hey, it was just a theory. I wasn't predicting it. I was just saying, here's something to keep an eye on. So take it easy. Point being, he went 0 for 7 on threes against Bradley. That was a thing. But coming back 2 for 4 against Minnesota, that was important. Like he needed to see some shots fall. It was kind of getting to that point of like, oh no, is this a thing?
He's probably in a huge spot on Thursday or Friday.
Totally.
Right? His post defense, I feel like, has kind of regressed a bit, and he will be challenged in that regard. And what happens if he gets 2 fouls? Do you go with 2 bigs? Do you go what do you do? That could be a really key kind of swing matchup in that game.
Yeah, I imagine they go They go with two bigs. I think it's also a big spot for Aaron Henry, and I liked what I saw from Aaron Henry in Des Moines. The kind of contrived controversy aside from the Thursday game against Bradley, I thought he overall came out looking pretty good, made some shots. I forget exactly what he did. Let me pull up the box score against Minnesota. 9 points, hit a 3 or 4 twos, 8 boards. Pretty solid 34-minute performance, and he's a key in this game because you're going to need the extra guy crashing the glass, and he's like, that is him. That is Aaron Henry, circle, exclamation point. In this game, he just needs to be hunting rebounds on both ends, both to kickstart Michigan State's transition and to keep LSU off the offensive glass. This needs to be a game where, Michigan State can't really match LSU's athleticism except at Aaron Henry's position.
I definitely agree with that. So,
and then also just to wrap up Des Moines a little bit more with Michigan State. Those 7 minutes from Cassius Winston, I think that's the difference that Michigan State has right now. That is what you saw in those 7 minutes is, I think, what everyone who watched Cassius as a freshman kind of envisioned as, like, man, this guy could be an all-timer at this place. His talent level, what he can do, but you've always been waiting for the killer instinct, right? That's been the conversation. His ability to take over a game, his ability to take and make big shots and kind of be the dude. He was the dude in that game. That looked like the guy who's going to be the preseason favorite to win National Player of the Year next year.
I mean, it was the first time I guess he's shown the killer instinct in the NCAA tournament, but come on, he had the killer instinct the last 2 months of the season. He's been the whole team.
He has been the whole team, but it's just different when he's just looking for his own shot over and over and over and over again, and that's what he was doing there.
Yeah, I just...
And it's different in the NCAA tournament.
I'll give you that. Yeah. I'll give you that. All right. He'll have a big matchup against Waters. That's going to be fun to watch.
I have questions about, this is going to be the game. Cassius Winston's defense has improved, no doubt, from his freshman year and from his sophomore year. He is not, no one would call him an elite high-level defender, though. Tremont Waters is probably quicker than him, right?
Yes.
Cassius Winston's lateral defense is still his biggest question mark, and this will test everything that guy's worked on for 3 years of Tom Izzo yelling at him about defense.
And I think Waters is the kind of guy who will go into this matchup knowing it's a one-on-one matchup, right?
Thirsty.
That's just how LSU plays. That's how he plays. He knows what's up. And when Winston has struggled, like against Illinois, for example, he struggled against teams that really can pressure the ball and get after you in that regard.
Mm-hmm. But he's also elevated his game when it has been billed as one-on-one against another elite point guard. 3-0 against Xavier Simpson this year. Obviously a completely different matchup than this one, but point remains. Okay, prediction time. What you got?
I'm taking MSU to win. I can't see Izzo losing to an interim head coach in the Sweet 16 with 5 days of prep or 4 days of prep.
That's fair.
I think it's a game, though, in the last 8 minutes, and I just think MSU, as they kind of always do, is consistently making plays, and LSU makes some mistakes, and MSU pulls away, wins by 6 or 7.
Okay. I'm going to take Michigan State by 12.
Game is not competitive at all, you're saying?
I think it will be competitive, and then midway through second half, there's separation. Michigan State's, or it'll be they run out, big lead. LSU comes back, gets it close. Michigan State pulls back out, wins by 12. I think it's a better team all around. Everyone, this team is as I've said, really, really, really connected. I think getting past the first weekend will make this group a little bit looser, and you'll see the team that played against Michigan.
I'll buy it.
And like Michigan State Duke needs to happen. Needs to happen. So, let's go. I'm going to DC for Michigan State Duke, so that game needs to happen.
You're not going to hang around for LSU Virginia Tech to go to the Final Four there?
No, if it's LSU Virginia Tech and Michigan State advances in Anaheim, I'm getting on a plane. I'm going to Anaheim.
Oh, that'll be a cheap flight.
And then to Anaheim. Or then to Minneapolis, I mean.
There you go. All right. This is officially the flu pod over here. What, do we have any thing we need to hit on before we get out of here?
Anything on the Big Ten? Do we owe any apologies when there's 4 or 3 teams left?
Three teams, right?
3 of the Sweet 16, yeah. And Indiana's still hanging tough in the NIT.
Big one tonight against the Shockers in Assembly Hall.
Does Romeo play?
He hasn't been playing, has he?
No.
Back hurts, man.
They keep saying, hey, he might play. I don't know.
So, Purdue, in that region, either Tony Bennett, Matt Painter, Rick Barnes, or who's the other coach left in there?
Dana Altman.
Or Dana Altman will get to the Final Four. Interesting little...
That is very interesting. And
a lot of dudes that have been searching for it there, right?
Altman's the only one with one, right? Did Barnes ever take Texas to the Final Four?
He did with TJ Ford, right? Did they?
That sounds right. Let's go quick Google just so that people don't yell at us. Dude, I'm an idiot. I just Googled Texas Wiki. Might want to add basketball in there.
What's that?
Nothing. Never mind. The listeners heard it.
Okay. Yeah, they went to the Final Four in Oregon in 2017 and Texas in 2003.
Yeah.
But
who are you taking out of there? You're taking Tony Bennett, aren't you?
I think it's Virginia. I mean, they had that little bit of bad vibes in that first half of that Gardner-Webb game, but they got through that, and like you said, I just think they're too good. It would be ironic, I think, if this Purdue team gets there, though, because this is probably his worst Purdue team that has been in this position, and I don't know. I'll root for Matt Painter to get there.
Yeah. No, that would be a great story. I'm still taking Tennessee, though. I had them in my original bracket, so I'm going to take them Vols.
I don't love Tennessee. That Iowa game was a disaster.
Neither do I, but I spent 2 years in Knoxville. I still got a lot of people down there, and a few towns will party the way Knoxville will if that happens. So,
surprised you ever left.
Shout out to the Vols, and that's not VOLS, that's VAWLS. And then in the other, let's go Midwest. Who you have coming out of there? So that's North Carolina versus Auburn, and that's Houston versus Kentucky.
I picked Kentucky originally. Not really feeling that.
We need Auburn, Kentucky to happen in the Elite Eight.
Oh, jeez.
What a game.
I think it's Houston, UNC in the Elite Eight, and I'll go Houston with the surprise.
I'll tell you what. I mean, some people might be complaining about a lack of upsets in this NCAA tournament, but if the Elite Eight ends up being Virginia, Tennessee, Auburn versus Kentucky, Gonzaga versus Michigan, and Duke versus Michigan State, those are like 4 games with ridiculous storylines, like every layer. They're also good games, good teams. Like, that'd be amazing. But anyway, so out of the Midwest, I will take Kentucky.
Okay.
I had Wofford previously, so since the Cats
beat your Terriers and you're just all the way on board.
Since the Cats beat my Terriers, I was Team Otis all the way on this one. But so I'll go with the Cats there. We already established. Oh wait, no, we didn't actually. Who comes out of the East and who comes out of the West?
Duke, and the winner of Michigan, Texas Tech.
Fair. I'm going to take Michigan State and Gonzaga.
Whoa. You
Heat.
like the Spartans over Duke?
Heat. I've thought all along, if there's ever a year that Michigan State is finally going to, vanquish the demon of the whole Duke thing, like, I don't know. Storylines say it's this team, like this ridiculous team, but guys on scooters and half the lineup can't play, and Cassius Winston hobbling up and down. This will be the team that beats Duke.
Wow.
And it's not all just storylines and karma. I mean, Michigan State plays high-level 2-point defense, maybe the best in the country. Duke can't shoot. And, I'm not saying Michigan State can shut down that offense, but I think it can do as well as anyone can. So, why not? Why not this year?
How have your why not picks worked out over the course of the podcast this year?
I don't know. I figured you'd have a chart for that. You're the analytics guy.
I don't. I can identify that trend without a chart.
So my Final Four is Michigan State, Gonzaga, Tennessee, Kentucky. And what was yours?
Ooh, the winner of Michigan, Texas Tech,
which is soft, but go ahead.
I picked Michigan. So all right, Michigan,
okay,
Duke, Virginia, and Houston.
Houston, baby, man, that'd be something else. If a bracket of North Carolina and Kentucky sees Houston, or if an Elite Eight. Sweet 16 that features North Carolina and Kentucky ends up with Houston emerging. That'd be something else. Okay, and who wins it all?
Duke.
Gonzaga. Jesuits.
Jeez.
All right, I think that'll do it for this week. Nice and tight, 50 minutes. I think that's good for the people who don't have time for
don't need to listen
too
to
much
me
nonsense
for an hour and 20 or whatever we usually go.
Give the folks a little preview or overview of what's available on Hoops right now.
We got a first look, which is like our initial deep dive into Texas Tech.
Yeah.
This week coming, we still have matchup breakdown. We're going to have a little feature about how Texas Tech defends and how Michigan can look to attack it. We'll have our normal game preview. We'll have all sorts of stuff leading up this week to the game on Thursday. What will we look for over at The Athletic?
Well, I've got a couple stories on there from the weekend in Des Moines. A story on the defiant personality of Xavier Simpson. A kind of backstory on how John Beilein treats the line of what you can and cannot get away with inside that program on and off the court.
The Rob Summers story, and that was fantastic.
Do you like that? Driving around
Yes.
West Morgantown? Yes. Anyone looking to check that out, that was a good score on the fly while in Des Moines. There's a big story on Aaron Henry and his uncle available. And then, of course, more coming this week. I have a story posting today on kind of looking back on the tenure of this current coaching staff, Dane Fife, Dwayne Stevens, and Mike Garland, and the importance of, everyone just makes this about Izzo getting back to Sweet 16, getting back to, the Final Four potentially. But I think this was a really big spot for this staff, and wrote a little bit about that, talked to those guys about what it means to get back to this point. So, and then obviously much more coming from DC with the Spartans, and who else knows what is in store for this week. So
you're not going to know what to do with yourself only covering one team for a week. We expect twice as much content.
I can pretty much guarantee you circumstances will create a situation that turns into equal amounts chaos. So we'll see. All right, that'll do it for this week. Subscribe to umhoops.com. Subscribe to The Athletic. Rate the pod. And leave a review. We love you all. Be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.